I'm back again with another Bleach video, and I've been waiting for this one. To say that the Fullbring arc is divisive amongst fans would be putting it lightly, with some people going as far to call it the worst canon arc in Bleach. And I'm here to tell you that I actually really enjoyed it. I found that most of the characters were interesting, and the plot and story flowed way better and was way more cohesive than any other arc that Bleach has ever had. This arc is easily the best paced arc in all of Bleach. I also found out that out of all the Bleach arcs, this was the most personal one for Ichigo and has some great character development for him. The Fullbring arc kicks off with Ichigo fully losing his Soul Reaper powers, meaning he can no longer see any of his powers in the Soul Society like Renji and Rukia. The impact of cutting out these characters is immediately noticeable, as the world itself feels a lot emptier without the Soul Reapers present. But I enjoyed this change of pace as it allows for the remaining characters to have more time to shine, as they don't have to share the screen with all the Soul Reapers. The Fullbring arc is essentially all about Ichigo, as after losing his Soul Reaper powers he can no longer see spirits of any kind, which is the life that he initially wanted. But it's clear that Ichigo doesn't feel fulfilled with his daily life anymore, which is where they introduce Kugo, who I absolutely loved. He is easily one of my favorite characters in Bleach. I found him incredibly entertaining, as when he is first introduced, he is super creepy and intimidating, offering Ichigo some ramen and asking Ichigo to join his book club, for him to later be a much more relaxed and goofier character who actually helps Ichigo. I liked how Kugo was on this constant teeter-totter between being a villain and Ichigo's best friend. It was a character dynamic I haven't really seen, and one that I personally enjoyed a lot. I'm also a fan of the new art direction for the Fullbring arc, as I really like how the characters are designed, and there is also just a general improvement in animation and art quality. When Kugo asks Ichigo if he wants to get his Soul Reaper powers back, Ichigo initially rejects Kugo, but after learning of Uryu being attacked by a guy with a mysterious power, and Uryu almost dying in a pool of his own blood, Ichigo decides he wants to get his powers back and gets in contact with Kugo. And Bleach does a good job of making Ichigo feel conflicted between living his normal life or getting his Soul Reaper powers back to help his friends. This arc feels more grounded and grittier than the rest of Bleach. Where most of Bleach is very expansive, this arc only takes place in Karakura Town, and does a good job at capturing the city and its inhabitants. With well done set pieces, it's easily the most unique arc in Bleach, by introducing characters like Ichigo's boss and giving screen time to more of Ichigo's classmates. And even with this aspect of it, and I know I'm gonna sound like a broken record at this point, but Bleach is still able to work comedy into its story effectively without killing the suspense and tension, and allows for a more human nature of these characters to show, as you get a nice balance of their serious and goofy moments. When Ichigo does meet up with Kugo, Kugo explains that he is a being called a Fullbring, which is a group of humans that can affect the souls of an object they have an attachment to, and that he wants to help Ichigo get his Soul Reaper powers back. The sound effects, shading, and lighting throughout the Fullbring arc were also nuts and very well done, especially considering the time this anime came out, which was over a decade ago. While Ichigo is with Kugo, we are also introduced to some of the other characters who are part of Kugo's group, Execution, with Riruka easily being the best character aside from Kugo, as she instantly starts crushing on Ichigo. And while I also really liked Yukio, I found characters like Giriko and Jackie to be kind of pointless and not really that interesting or worth investing in. This is where Ichigo also finds out that Chad is a member of Execution, which is good to know, because I thought he might have been attacked by the same person that attacked Uryu, because he hadn't shown up in a while and I was starting to get worried. We also learn that the reason they want to help Ichigo regain his Soul Reaper powers is so they can get rid of their own powers, because according to them, it's a burden, because their powers are actually the residue of hollows that attack their mothers, and their power is a constant reminder of that. This is an interesting way for these characters to exist, and I found that conflict they started with to be an emotional one and handled very well. And I love how tense this arc keeps getting as we learn more and more about the villain of this arc, as Ichigo learns that his name is Tsukishima. This arc did a great job with Ichigo's character and confronting just how conflicted he is, as because he doesn't have any Soul Reaper powers, he can protect Yuzu from getting attacked by a hollow, and Kugo, the absolute saint that he is, comes in to help Ichigo. And Kugo is such a nice character for the most part that I really enjoyed whenever he was on screen. I really cannot overstate just how much I enjoyed Kugo. And after this incident, Ichigo decides to go through with the training to get his Soul Reaper powers back, with Ichigo getting his substitute Soul Reaper badge returned to him, even though he threw it into a lake earlier, which means it would have taken ages to find. But this moment really helps to build a sense of camaraderie and trust between Ichigo and Kugo. The training arc is kind of goofy as Ichigo goes up against Mr. Pork, which is just some guy Riruka kidnapped, which probably happened when Riruka was stalking Ichigo earlier. The only interesting thing about this training fight is Ichigo finding out what he feels the most attached to, which turns out to be his Soul Reaper badge, due to how proud he is of being a Soul Reaper, which just shows how much being a Soul Reaper really means to Ichigo. And while this is going on, Shishigawara, who works under Tsukishima, goes to attack Orihime, but he ends up getting defeated by thin air thanks to Orihime's looks. And right when it seemed like all this was going to be was a goofy scene, Tsukishima shows up and turns his book into a sword and attacks Orihime. But while it seems like his attack does nothing, Orihime calls Tsukishima a friend, which is weird and even something that she acknowledges. And at this point, I thought his power had something to do with affecting a person's heart. And while this story does go back and forth between characters sometimes, it's nowhere near as often as the Aranka arc, and I think it works more effectively in the context of this arc, as the mystery slowly ramps up bit by bit. I also like how Kugo makes Ichigo question his faith and trust in everyone he knows, with questioning characters like Kisuke's true intentions and how Isshin won't tell Ichigo the truth about who he is. And the fact that these characters scarcely show up helps to lend some credence to what Kugo is saying. Kugo also realizes that forcing Ichigo into a real fight is what will help him to unlock his Fullbring powers, so he makes Jackie fight Ichigo, who, while I found pointless for the most part, has a sad and mysterious backstory, so I can't say she's the worst character. That would go to Giriko. This fight was solid, it was much better than the other training fights, but still nowhere near as over the top as some of Bleach's other fights. But it's cool that Ichigo learns that his Soul Reaper powers have always been a part of him, which makes sense considering who Isshin is. And it's during this fight that we learn that Tsukishima was the original leader of Execution, and that his power, Book of the End, is a sword that can cut through anything, like in one of those bad TV ads. Which is interesting because it seemed to Chad like it had the ability to alter memories, but as far as everyone knows, it can't do that, which just continues to build suspense and tension as to what is actually happening. And while this fight was happening, Tsukishima shows up and confronts Kugo and Ichigo, with Chad getting cut by Tsukishima and Ichigo putting up a pretty good fight, even in the weakened and reduced state he's in, which makes this villain look pathetic and weak as a result. But I found it was more about the mystery surrounding Tsukishima and how his powers actually work that really helped to make him a menacing character. It was also funny when Ichigo wanted to help Kugo fight Tsukishima, but Kugo just elbows Ichigo in the back, which was hilarious. And I found this back and forth from being super nice to an asshole to be a major factor in why I like Kugo so much as a character. Eventually this fight does end, with Yukio pressing the goddamn pause button on it, literally, as he traps Ichigo in his PSP. Yep, it's just a literal PSP. And I like how while all this is going on, Uryu is just still in the hospital chilling. And it's also interesting that if Uryu and Orihime were attacked by the same person, then why didn't they suffer the same type of injury? Which just further adds to the mystery of what's going on. And right after this, Kugo and Ichigo have a friendly duel between friends inside of Yukio's handheld console, with Kugo being super menacing throughout, cutting into Ichigo's shoulder and even slicing Ichigo's eyes, which he says he did for Ichigo's own sake, which is hilarious, as it actually helps Ichigo to awaken his Fullbring powers, which was a flashy reveal. And Kugo basically goes, "See, I helped you by cutting your eyes." I liked how right after this, we see Riruka run into Tsukishima, which is just hilarious. Imagine being on a trailing mission and running into the final boss. And I found it funny that Tsukishima is just walking around casually, as most villains are actively hunted down, but Tsukishima was just chilling. It's also interesting how Riruka was attacked by Tsukishima, but was still there after Ichigo completed his Fullbring training. I have no clue what is going on anymore. After Ichigo finishes his training for the day, we have one of my favorite moments in any anime ever, as when he returns home, he sees Tsukishima in his living room spending time with his family, and we see that Tsukishima has affected the memories of his sisters and his friends into thinking that he's Ichigo's cousin. And this really helps to create a hopeless sense of dread, as Ichigo's reaction just says it all in this scene, as he feels like there's nothing he can do, with him freaking out and attacking Tsukishima, which makes everyone start treating him like he's crazy, which does not help the situation and just further escalates Ichigo's anger. And it's interesting how all this has been happening off screen, as we just assumed that if the villain was going to do something, we would have seen it. But while Ichigo has been learning Fullbring, every single person he's ever known has been affected by Tsukishima's power. And this is where we see one of Ichigo's character flaws in play, as he blames himself for being unable to save others. Even in a situation where it was impossible, he still blames himself for not helping, which is a much more human flaw than other shonen protagonists. It's also during this encounter with Tsukishima Tsukishima that we finally learn how his powers work, as he can slot himself into the memories of the people he's cut down. And to that person, Tsukishima has been a part of their lives forever, and is someone they feel a strong connection to. I like how this power works, and it's similar to slotting a bookmark into any part of a book, which is something that Tsukishima has with him constantly. After this bombshell, Ichigo asks that if he killed Tsukishima, would it undo all the memory manipulation, which is a big thing for Ichigo to do, considering he doesn't really like killing people, and this isn't a holo or an Aranka, this is an actual human being he's talking to. It's just a show of how far he's been pushed to the edge and how desperate he is to fix the situation, with the only people not affected by Tsukishima being Kugo and maybe Uryu, who is starting to head towards Ichigo. Anyways, Ichigo and Kugo are basically all alone and work together to get to Tsukishima's house and defeat him. And after working really well together, Kugo gets hit by Tsukishima's sword, meaning his time is limited. And this all builds towards this climax where Uryu arrives at Tsukishima's house, and it's this double reveal, as we learn that not only is Uryu perfectly normal, but the person who actually attacked him was Kugo. And Kugo has what I think was the coldest scene in Bleach, as he just appears right behind Ichigo and steals his Fullbring powers, leaving him powerless. This was a complete mindfuck and a half, as Kugo has always either looked like Ichigo's best friend or a complete villain, and that is what made me like his character so much. And even after the reveal, I still like his character because of how well executed it was. And in what I again find the most emotional moment in Bleach, Ichigo starts crying and begging for Kugo to give him his powers back. This hurts, especially since Ichigo is a character who always tries to remain strong both emotionally and physically, but without his powers, there's nothing he can do but beg. But before he does anything else, he gets stabbed from behind, and right when he thought that his dad and Kisuke had been memory manipulated, he realizes that they didn't stab him and turns around, and while he can't see who it is initially, he eventually sees that it is Rukia, who returns his Soul Reaper powers back to him. And this was such a beautiful reunion with a perfect blend of comedy thrown in, along with an inspiring speech that really sells this as a great moment for Bleach.
Ichigo, they don't know the kinds of hopeless situations you've overcome in the past. Show them, Ichigo. Show them that despair, no matter how deep, will never be enough to stop you.
Right.
And while Kugo thinks that Rukia is the only Soul Reaper, he turns out to be dead wrong, as from the shadows, a familiar voice calls out,
Shut up, dumbass!
That's right, my boy, Renji, along with Byakuya, Kenpachi, Toshiro, and Ikaku. And goddamn, what a hype entrance this was. And I love their new designs, they're so crisp. And we learned that it was everyone who put their powers into the sword to help return Ichigo's Soul Reaper powers back to him, which just shows you how much respect they have for Ichigo. This leaves Kugo scared shitless, and it's crazy how the Fullbringers went from being good guys to the villains. We also learned that Kugo was the first substitute Soul Reaper, which does make it a cool matchup with Ichigo versus Kugo. But some of the other one-on-one fights weren't as good, as Giriko dies basically instantly thanks to Kenpachi just one hit killing him. And this didn't bother me too much, considering Giriko is the worst character of this arc, so I didn't care that his fight was trash. The Rukia versus Ririka fight was alright, as Ririka seemed like she didn't really want to fight against the Soul Reapers and Ichigo, and just attacks Rukia with cute toys and disappears. The Renji fight was interesting, as even though Jackie is a human, I have such little faith in Renji to win, and since Jackie doesn't die, I'll give this fight a tie. Toshiro's fight with Yukio was boring up until the end, where Toshiro calls out Yukio for being ignored by his family, and we learn that Yukio stole all of his family's money and was happy when his parents committed suicide, which is really psychotic. The two best side fights, however, were easily Ikaku's fight against Shishigawara, which was an all-out fist fight with it ending at the hands of an Ikaku headbutt, and also the Tsukishima fight against Byakuya, which was great. And while Tsukishima is not a strong character, he is pretty smart, and the fight ends with him getting caught off guard and a hole blasted in his chest. And then there's the Kugo versus Ichigo fight, which I absolutely loved and was animated incredibly well, as we learn that the substitute Soul Reaper badge is a surveillance tool that manages and controls his Soul Reaper powers, and that they don't actually trust Ichigo and plan on disposing of him. And even with this knowledge, Ichigo still chooses the Soul Reapers. As well that may have been their plan initially for Ichigo, he proved himself to the Soul Society as an invaluable asset with taking taking down Aizen, along with Ichigo making unbreakable bonds with other Soul Reapers for life. And with this resolution, we get to see Ichigo and Kugo's Bankai, which were both great, with this fight ending with Kugo dying. And when I thought the fight was over, Tsukishima comes out of nowhere to attack Ichigo and Rukia, and then the character I least expected, Ririka, appeared and saved both of them, which proved that she was not like the other Fullbringers and is actually a nice person at heart. And the way Bleach ends, with Ichigo requesting Kugo's body so that he can bury them, which goes to show the amount of respect Ichigo has for his opponents, along with him making his commitment to the Soul Society to be there when they need him, which I think was the perfect way for Bleach to end. This arc felt like a personal attack on Ichigo's livelihood, and I loved it. While most villains are some big bad evil that aims to destroy the world and the main character has to stop them, this villain had a personal vendetta out to ruin Ichigo's life, and it made for one of the most creative arcs I have ever watched in any anime. The Fullbring arc is my favorite arc in all of original Bleach, from the majority of the characters being great to the updated art style and the amazing animation and art quality. I was never bored during this arc, even despite the lack of action, with the mystery doing a good job at holding my interest, which I found to be very impressive, and most importantly, the pacing being incredibly fluid and easy to follow, which is an amazing breakthrough for Bleach to achieve. I want to thank everyone who has watched any of my videos, and I'm looking forward to checking out the 1000 Year Blood War anime. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you when I see you.